Make an Impact, episode 28. A goal without a review plan is just a goal forgotten.
This is Make an Impact podcast. Do you want to make an impact in this world? Do you want to do more in your life and business? This is the Make an Impact podcast, hosted by Pete Spakowski. This podcast is where we teach the skills and share the stories to give you the leadership tools to make an impact in this world. Get ready to make an impact. Let's get started.
Well, hello everybody and welcome to Make an Impact. My name is Peter Spakowski and I am your host. I want to welcome you to Make an Impact podcast. If this is your first time listening, I welcome you and I'm so glad to have you here. For anybody listening, if you haven't done so already, make sure you subscribe to this podcast. Don't miss a single episode. Maybe you're somebody that feels stuck and you just don't know where to start in anything that you want to get done and any goals that you want to get accomplished. Goal setting is important, and many people fail at the very beginning of setting goals. So if you haven't listened to episodes 26 and 27, go back and listen to those, especially episode number 26, because people, when they first set a goal, they set it up and it's set up to fail. It's not set up for success. You really need to transform the way that you do goal setting. I've got my own technique that works for me, and I set goals every single year, and I've been doing that for the last 30 years. In fact, I accomplished 90% plus of my goals. Now, I do have some goals that are 5-10 years that haven't been achieved yet, but I'm still working on it. I'm still getting there. It's only been a couple of years in some of them, so I still have some time, but I do go and I set goals for the year, and I set long-term goals. I have weight goals. I have financial goals. I have goals of things that I want in my life. Sometimes I just feel stuck. Do you ever feel stuck? This podcast is about taking you from being stuck and making you unstoppable. It's really transforming your mindset and transforming the strategies that you use in your life, in your business, and in your health. But again, if you've not yet subscribed to this podcast, make sure you subscribe. This is a weekly podcast, and I welcome you every week. The podcast has been growing, and one of those ways that it's been growing is I've been asking people to forward this podcast to 1 to 2 to 3 people every single week. And if you do that and the new listeners do that, this podcast will continue to grow. I want to invite you to go out and check out my website. It's maimpact.com. And more importantly, at the very top of the webpage, I have 2 webinars coming up, and they're transformation webinars. One is transformation, your goal setting and what you accomplish in your life. And the other is really transforming your health. How have I been able to lose over 50 pounds of body fat? And I've kept it off for over 30 years. The potential's still there for me to gain that weight back, even more weight back than that. And I've been able to keep it off. It's a struggle. It's a struggle for everybody. And my weight does fluctuate from, 5 or 10 pounds, but I've been able to keep it under control for 30 years. And I want to share the strategies that I've done to transform that. So I want this to be an interactive podcast. Not only do I want you to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode, but I want to get to know you. Send me an email. Ask me a question for this podcast. I do have several questions that I've been sitting on, and I think I'll review them next week when I review some of the things about goal setting on when you fail. When a goal fails, what do you do? I'm going to talk on, though I'm going to answer those questions in that episode. But today we're talking about goals. And today's quote is a quote I often use. And that is, a goal without a review plan is just a goal forgotten. That's a quote that I use quite often. And anytime that I sit down and review goals and I establish goals, it's a quote that I keep out in front of me. It's a quote that I have in my iPhone under my to-do list that every time I complete it, it'll remind me again in 3 to 4 weeks on that quote, just because I need to have a review plan. And it also reminds me to go out and review my goals. A goal needs to not only have a category, it needs to be significant. It needs, like the quote from episode 26, you have to be inspired by the goal. You have to believe in the goal, and you have to do the work to accomplish the goal. And reviewing the goals on a week-to-week basis or month-to-month basis, and we'll talk about what you should do in reviews later in this episode, but you need to have a goal plan on reviewing your goals. There's been many times that even when I've written down a goal and I've set a date to the goal, I don't review it. It's sat in my phone or it's sat in my to-do list, and I just didn't pay attention to it. I had no plan to review it. And in fact, it's been several different categories. I don't care if it's my weight, spending time with my kids, career. I've focused on goals, but then I never reviewed them. So often there would be some times that a year would go by and I wouldn't have yet reviewed the goal, and a year went by and I did nothing. Podcast. I wanted to start podcast a long time ago. I first started listening to Cliff Ravenscraft back in, I think it was maybe 2008, 2007. And I've been wanting to do a podcast. And in fact, I didn't do anything with a podcast until 2018. It wasn't a real high goal of mine. It wasn't something that I was establishing. And I didn't really know what I wanted to podcast on. So I wasn't really driven by it, but it wasn't something that I reviewed either. So every year would go by and I would think about starting a podcast, and I never did. So it just wasn't really high on my goal list to do anything with. It would have been great to start many years ago, and I have a lot of information that I would love to share, and I think about how many episodes I would be up to by now. In fact, one of the people that I used to listen to all the time just hit almost, I think, episode 465. I mean, that's a lot of podcast episodes. I do have a daily podcast, and that's over 160 episodes now. It's called The Daily Impact. If you haven't listened to that, but go over and take a listen to that. Subscribe to that also. That podcast is on fire. It's just blowing up with the number of downloads. So it's great. It's a short 1 to 3 minute podcast, and it just talks about different quotes. But let's talk about goal plans. You need to have the different categories. You have to believe in the goal. You have to be inspired by the goal, and you have to do the work to accomplish the goal. So how do I set up review plans for my goals? I keep everything in a spreadsheet, and that's available if you go and subscribe to my webinar, the Transform Your Goals webcast or webinar. The spreadsheet's out there, and I have it in my to-do list that I review my goals every single month. I review it the first Saturday of every month. Now, some goals I review more often. Some goals I review less often. Some goals I maybe will review twice a year, 3 times a year, but I don't need to review any more than that. In my to-do list, I set up a reminder to review my goals the first Saturday of every month. I then go through my spreadsheet. And again, I don't have many goals. I don't have a whole lot to review, but I will sit down and go through my spreadsheet and review the goal. If I'm making great progress, say if it's something like I'm reading books, if I want to read 3 books a year or 5 books a year, and I've already read 3 books and it's been halfway through the year, I might not review that goal again for another 3 months. So in my spreadsheet, I have a short description, longer description, and a target date. And then I have a column that says review date. When was the last time I reviewed this goal? And every time that the review date comes up, I will give the progress and the corrective actions around it. And then I'll establish a new review date. There's some goals that are maybe like my weight. When I'm focused on my weight, I will review that goal every single day. So I will put a to-do list item in my phone, and I will sit down and I will weigh myself every single day. I'm constantly on that goal. If weight loss is a goal of yours, you need to do work every single day. You need to monitor that goal every single day. Paying off credit card debt. You pay credit cards once a month. What I'll do is I'll set up a financial goal. What do I want my net worth to be at the end of the year? Right? I may want to set a goal that I want to increase my net worth by $70,000 this year. Okay, what am I going to do it? That's not a goal that I need to review every week or every day or really every month. So I will review it every 3 months. I will sit down, and if I'm making good progress, I'll review it in 3 months. If it's not making good progress, a lot of it's tied to the stock market, I might review it in a month and maybe have to make some adjustments at that time. But there are different things that you can do for each of these different goals. It's more of a hunch. When you sit down and review your goals, if you're making great progress and it comes almost natural to you, you can wait longer to review that goal. I would suggest you do not want to go longer than 3 months without reviewing a goal. I often have every month I review a goal, or every 2 if I'm making great progress. If I'm making great progress, I'll put it off 2 months. If I feel like I can afford to, that I'm doing the work and I'm keeping focus on that goal. Maybe it's a goal that I've set up and I don't pay attention to it as much as I should. I will not only review that goal once a month on my spreadsheet when I sit down. Maybe I want to assign certain tasks. When you establish a goal, you break down the goal into multiple different tasks. I will create those tasks in my phone, in my to-do list, where I can check off each of the items. Some of them, a good to-do list will have something that is reoccurring after the task is completed. I may want to review action items that I'm doing towards a goal 3 days after I've checked it off. It might sit in my to-do list for 4 days before I actually do something with it. But once I do it, it disappears and it won't remind me to do it again for 3 weeks. A lot of times that, again, is nutrition, or maybe working on web pages or working on podcasts. There's multiple different goals that I'll break up that goal into multiple different items and put them in my phone for more frequent reviews. But again, goals need to have review dates. They need to have a specific plan on how you're going to accomplish them. And you need to make sure that you remind yourself to review your goals. And again, I suggest either making a calendar entry, a to-do list item entry. And as you get to do this, you will get better at estimating how often you need to review it. Again, anything to do with weight, it's daily. Anything financial, it's monthly or quarterly. Those are the only 2 that I really set that, hey, you need to do that every day. Or financially, you might, if you're trying to get out of credit card debt, you might not need to review it every single week. You might not need to even review it every month. You might want to wait every 2 months and review your credit card debt. If it's not going down at that time, put some action items. Credit card debt's not something that you can pay off very quickly. So it doesn't do a whole lot of good reviewing that goal every single week, unless you're out there just killing it and grinding every day, going to work and getting extra income to pay down that debt. When you do the debt snowball, it really, you'll be able to see it when you do your bills, if you're making an impact to your credit card debt or not. So again, you need to establish clear, defined review plans. Weekly, monthly, quarterly, biannually, whatever it is, make sure you've got a plan for each of your goal items and each task that makes up a certain goal. If you do that and you have a review plan, you'll pay more attention. This is another reason why you don't want to have 10 or 20 different goals in your life, right? It would require too much time. It's better to have 3 to 6 goals, maybe 1 goal per category that I discuss in episode 26, and you really knock it out of the park. Think of what you would do and what you would accomplish if you accomplish that goal. Remember, they need to be significant, right? They need to make a huge impact. They need to push you. They need to make you drive towards getting something accomplished. That's all I have for you today. It's a shorter podcast today. Next week, it'll be a little bit longer. We'll talk about what happens when you fail at a goal. And then we'll also talk about the different questions that I'm getting. And I thank you for that. If you go out to maimpact.com, also at the top of the form, there is a list, or there is a form that you can fill out and ask a question for this podcast. I'd be happy to answer it for you on here. I'm also saving a bunch of those for the webinar that I have coming up in December. Make sure you go out there and register for the seminar. I'd love to have you live so you can ask me questions live online. Thank you for joining me today. It was a pleasure. Make sure you go out and subscribe and give me a 5-star review. Till next time, go out and make an impact.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Make an Impact Podcast with Peter Spakowski. There is only one thing that is left for you to do, and that's head over now to maimpact.com and get involved. We've loved having you here and look forward to connecting further. Until next time.